Okay guys, here is going to be the fast version of the rundown if you don't want to sit around and watch the side-by-side comparison. These are all bulbs that I've tried out in my Z4 and in my E60. So starting on the left, stock bulb. Then the next over is the brightest and the widest and also the most expensive. Certainly in my map lights in the E60. The next one is also very white, very bright, puts out about as much light and about the same sort of light pattern that you get from the stock bulb. So these are sort of my go-to. This is what's in my vanities, or not my vanities, but rather my map lights in the Z4. Former puddle lights from the Z4, very white, very good. I've since switched over to these, which are 8 LEDs. It's actually a smaller light, but they put off much more light. So if you can use puddle lights or Footwell lights, which is what I got in Z4, do that. These are certainly better ones than stock, or maybe even better than these. These next two right here are very similar to what you'll see in some of the name brand kits. These are not from those guys, from anybody you know. These are just cheap eBay bulbs. They look like a good idea, but they're actually a very poor design. The sides here, they don't fill up the reflector with enough light, and these heads right here get blocked by the black snap ring that you see right here on your light. The other thing too is that you have to remember that this is from an E60. These are at an angle. They're not straight down, so the bulb itself is not centered. It is going to be off-center and blocked slightly by this ring. I've never removed them. I don't know what it looks like with that. Do it at your own risk. It might look great. It might look bad. But these are also stupid blue. They are the weakest of the bunch. They're just worthless, man. They really are worthless. Not interested in them at all. Now back here, what I did for the polished bucket here for the mean dome light, I used these. They're very interesting. They have two in the top with a lens to sort of disperse, but they actually sort of touch the frosted plastic that's in there, so almost. So it's not as effective maybe if that diffusion wasn't there. But these around the collar here, they really fill up this reflector bowl quite nicely. These alone are really, really bright. I really like these. They are at an angle though. This stem is not straight, it's kind of at an angle. So as a recap, for the dome, I use these. For the puddles and Footwell lights, I use these. For these map lights in the Z4, I use this one, white, bright, same light pattern as the stock bulb. In the E60, which is the reflector you see here, I use these. The crown here doesn't get blocked as badly with the black trim ring. The sides put off a lot of light. This is a miniature sun in your car. They're the most expensive of the bunch. The price fluctuates, but whatever. You know, I think they're really cool. The seller's name on eBay is Neotuned, so go ahead and head on over there. He sells them in pairs. They're quite awesome. And now on to the side-by-side. What you see here now are the standard bulb on the left side and the paddle style on the right side. The color temperature is going to be pretty accurate here actually. Looking at my screen, what you see on the left is kind of what you're going to see in the car. What you see on your right, same thing. It seems whiter, bluer, a little crisper, certainly more amber and warm on the other side. And I'm going to flip them over. Now here's another thing you're going to notice about the two bulbs, and especially with LEDs in general. LEDs can be somewhat directional, and the standard halogen bulb is going to be very broad. If you look side by side, it appears that the standard bulb is actually brighter and has a hotter spot on it compared to the left side with the paddle, which we use for paddles for puddles, as we were joking. But if you look at it, it is a much truer representation of the color. So that's something else to consider. Next up we have the 8 bulb. So you see 4 on top and there's 2 here and 2 there compared to the standard. You'll notice that this one is much bluer compared to the previous LED, the flat one, the paddle. The other thing that I would sort of notice on this is that while it's not as strong, it has a little bit more spread of light, and that just might be due to the imperfections on the PCB. But again, no comparison at all to the standard bulb. Now what you're probably going to want to do is use these for map lights, because you have this. So let me show you that in comparison. Again, it's actually not really a comparison at all. The other one is very blue, and it's very weak by comparison. Next up, we have the 10 bulb, which is 6 on top and 2 on either side versus the standard. Certainly brighter. Look at the light pattern here though. Much wider pattern here than it is here. This is much more directional. These are sort of flat on the top. Very interesting light. Again, I think this is actually the bluest of the bunch, and most of the aftermarket kits that I see, be it on eBay or on the lower end sites that sell lights for your cars or mods, however you want to call it, not naming anybody in particular because it's not any of their kits, but the cheap eBay kind here, as you'd see in some of the shoddier sites. But again, now let's take a look at the spray pattern of the light. Definitely more directional, definitely a colder blue, and not the most effective of the bunch, that's for sure. So here we go with a 5 light LED, and against the standard bulb again. Now this is finally where the bulb, I think, is kind of met its match. You can see here that's very bright, and it's a nice wide light pattern spread around here, and it's fairly comparable actually to the standard, but it's very clean white. We're back to a good white. This one in particular, it's 4 around the outside and 1 on the top. I actually use these as my map lights in my Z4, my E85. Very effective, very bright, very useful. They illuminate the bucket, the chrome bucket that you have in the overhead for the map lights very nicely. Let me show you the spread pattern on this too. Now, it's actually going to be kind of hard to separate the two, and I'm trying to just make them go off camera so you can kind of see some of the pattern. But the one on the left, which is the one that I'm using, has a very wide spread of the light. It's not as spotty, and it works absolutely wonderfully in my car. And I think, as far as that's concerned, it throws about the same amount of light off and has about the same pattern that the stock bulb does. Very pleased with them, and I think I only paid maybe, I don't know, maybe $1 a bulb or something. I got like a fistful of them originally. I was going to buy them for my landscape lighting, but hey, put them in my car and they look fantastic. So for my Z4, absolutely in my overheads. So these are actually my second favorite bulb. So now we have this crazy one that has a ton of them around the crown and then 6 on top. This is my favorite and my least favorite bulb, and I'll tell you why. In the E60, the way that the lights are, they come in at an angle. So a lot of the other bulbs have there's that black snap ring for your map light, and the way that the bulb is, it points to the edge, and so a lot of the other lights do not work in there. But this sucker is so bright, it's insane, and especially with these around the crown. I use these as my map lights in my E60, and my God, you don't want to actually be driving in the dead of night and have somebody turn those on. They will blind you, which is kind of why it makes them maybe my favorite, but probably the least useful. If you want absolutely the most light you can put out, this thing right here is just totally it. And now I'm going to turn it on, and you're just going to get blown out by how much light this thing gets. So here's the test jig. Bam. Now, you can see already it puts out so much light, you can kind of see the filament on the stock bulb. So clearly more light. And look at the spread pattern on that. It is so much wider here. It's even kind of drowning out the stock bulb. When it comes to pointing down, like there's just no comparison. It is super white too. This is the most white of all of the bulbs, but it's also the brightest, the most expensive. They can be, usually they're sold in pairs, and I believe I bought them from a guy called Neotuning. They tend to be really, really flippin' bright, but you know, that also means you're going to pay a little bit more. They're definitely more powerful than some of the name brand aftermarket lights that I've seen from other people, having parked in a parking lot next to somebody else that bought a another name brand kit. But these are actually going to be anywhere from $2 to $5 to sometimes $7 a bulb, really depending on how the seller is feeling that day, if he wants to bump up the price. I bought two originally for $5.80, and then the next day they were like $13 for a pair. So my bad. I should have bought a bunch when I had the chance, but I was just buying these to test these out. Here's a quick note on my test rig. I have this solar panel. It's outputting 12 volts, and I plugged in here, patched in a 2.1 millimeter power all the way through. This is 2.5 that goes into the actual unit. I got a little block here, screwed in the terminals, and then bought these 75-cent clips that are, you know, for the bulb holders, these receptacles. So it was like $2 for that, 75 cents a piece for that. This cable right here cost me, I think, $1.50, so my test rig was practically no money. Ended up buying it at All Electronic, just stupid plug. They didn't really know what the heck I was doing, so it's not really like they care, but up in Van Nuys, ended up going there and picking up all this stuff for a couple of bucks so I could make this little test for you. Okay, since I was talking about the paddle lights, paddles for puddles, this is the one that I actually use in my footwells of my Z4. It's total 8, there's 4 and 4. Very bright, very nice, work absolutely fantastically in the car. Couldn't be happier. Who's the seller here? The Audio Shop 123. He sold me those. Very cool, definitely used for my puddle lights. Now these are the other ones that I bought. They are $4.88 for a pair. They have, you know, the lens over the top, and then they have around the crown. So 2 on the top, 4 around the crown. I use these as my dome lights in my E60. Very bright. The crown actually puts off quite a bit, so it lights up that reflective bucket. Makes the car, you know, makes the interior really bright. Even by itself, I think they are pretty powerful. The one thing you should know about that is if you buy these, the stem here is actually canted at a slight angle. It's not perfectly straight. So it's very unique kind of bulb. So you just have to remember they are polarity sensitive and they have that little angle in them. So when you put the clip on the back, that's the retainer, usually what you have to do is you have to fit the bulb through the bottom of the bucket and then make the clip go on top and then turn it when you know, sync it to the circuit board. So it's kind of like think of a board, and you've got a bolt and a nut, and you have to go through the board. These are really good. Definitely use them for my my domes. Happy that I use them for my dome lights. And they're very white. They match the other ones that have that crazy crown on them. Very pleased with them. So these are, like I said, really my favorites of all. They are now 2 of them for $10.50. They're a total of 18 bulbs on there, so 6 on the crown, 12 on the crown, or whatever, and then 6 on top. So very good, very bright. The whitest of all of them. They all generate heat. For as many bulbs as this one has, it is not as hot as you would think it is. It's actually colder than the cooler rather than the stock bulb. So all of these, even though they do generate a lot of heat, BMW's designed those buckets to accept a lot of heat, so you're not going to melt these housings. But this is certainly less heat than the stock bulb, and he's actually neo-tuned. So what I've basically learned from playing with all of these LEDs, aside from the 2 that are in the car that I'm using, the 8 side or the